Imagine standing in an airport, excited for a much-needed getaway, only to have the very people responsible for your safety mock you for something as simple as the shoes on your feet. Picture a young woman, her eyes filled with dignity, her heart anxious but strong, shaking off the cruel laughter echoing through the terminal. Now witness the most unexpected twist. This woman who was ridiculed for her humble shoes doesn't simply walk away. She rises above it all and departs in a helicopter, intrigued. Get ready for a gripping tale of bold resilience, vicious prejudice, and ultimate triumph that will leave you speechless. Ebony James had not always been a confident person, but she had grown into someone who carried herself with quiet strength. Raised in a modest household in Atlanta, Georgia, she learned early on that the world would judge her sometimes harshly based on her skin color, her clothes, or her family's financial status. Her mother, Lorraine, worked 2 jobs to ensure Ebony could attend a decent school, and her father had passed away when she was young. Despite their difficulties, Lorraine always tried to instill in her daughter a sense of dignity and pride. Graduating from a local university near home, Ebony landed a promising internship at a tech startup. That position turned into a full-time job, faster than she could have imagined. Finally able to afford small luxuries, Ebony decided to take a short vacation before beginning her new role. She had been eyeing a trip to Chicago, partly for the big city vibes, partly for the food, and partly for a chance to visit her best friend from college, Ariana. Ariana had convinced her that the crisp autumn air of the windy city would refresh her soul. As Ebony arrived at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, she was wearing her favorite pair of scuffed-up sneakers. They were comfortable, though, far from trendy. She'd bought them years ago, and through multiple attempts to keep them clean, they had seen better days. But Ebony cherished these sneakers because they were the last gift from her father. He had saved a month's worth of tips from his night shift job as a security guard to buy them. Despite being older now, Ebony found sentimental value in them that no amount of money could replace. She approached the check-in counter of American Airlines, a real airline she'd flown before without incident. The line was reasonably short, and Ebony exhaled, relieved she wouldn't have to rush to her gate. After scanning her boarding pass, she moved on to security, noting a group of flight attendants gathered by the staff entrance. She didn't pay them much attention until she heard a whisper, then a giggle. The laughter carried across the echoing terminal. Ebony glanced their way and noticed 2 young female flight attendants wearing crisp uniforms pointing at her shoes while snickering. It was a subtle moment, but Ebony felt a sting in her chest. She considered ignoring them, but the echoes of their mocking laughter seemed to follow her. Her cheeks grew hot, and a pang of old insecurity crept in. She thought, maybe I should have bought new shoes for this trip. But that thought vanished as quickly as it came. Why should she change to meet someone else's judgment? Ebony reminded herself that these people didn't know her story, or the sentimental value behind those sneakers. She squared her shoulders and decided she was going to get on that plane with her head held high. She would not let anyone's laughter take away her joy. Little did she know this was only the beginning of a journey that would test her resilience in ways she never imagined. Settling at gate B19, Ebony found a seat near a large window overlooking the tarmac. She loved watching planes take off and land. It reminded her that life was full of possibilities and that there was an entire world out there waiting to be explored. With the gate relatively quiet, Ebony allowed herself a moment to relax. She sipped a bottle of water, wandering to the many sights she hoped to see in Chicago. She didn't notice the flight attendant's approach until she heard a voice. "Ma'am, are you traveling alone?" Ebony turned to see one of the same female crew members who had been laughing earlier. The crew member had a forced smile plastered on her face. Ebony nodded politely. "Yes, I am." "Why do you ask?" "Oh, no reason." "Just wanted to see if you needed any assistance," the attendant said, her tone sugary but condescending. A few steps behind her stood a male attendant, arms folded, wearing an unmistakable smirk. Ebony could feel his eyes darting from her face to her shoes. Instinctively, she tucked her feet beneath the seat. "I'm fine, thanks," Ebony said, trying to maintain a polite demeanor. The attendant shrugged, gave a terse smile, and walked away with the male attendant. Ebony caught a snippet of their hushed conversation. "The shoes are practically falling apart," the male attendant whispered. "I know, right?" "And did you see how old her bag is?" the female answered, trying and failing to hide her grin. Ebony's heart pounded. She could feel tears threatening to form, but she blinked them back. She was used to subtle racism and classist comments, but it still stung every time. "Focus," she told herself. "You're going on a trip. Don't let them ruin it." She took another sip of water to steady herself. Moments later, they began the boarding process. People lined up waiting to have their tickets scanned. Ebony found herself behind an elderly couple who chatted pleasantly about their grandchildren. The vibe was serene, and for a moment, Ebony forgot about the flight attendant's remarks. When she reached the boarding door, an agent scanned her ticket. "Have a good flight," the agent said, tone warm, obviously unaware of the tension in the air. Ebony smiled, stepped onto the jet bridge, and braced herself. She had chosen a seat near the back window seat, 28F. She preferred the view and rarely minded the extra steps to exit. Inside the cabin, Ebony slid into her seat, stowed her bag, and gazed out the window. She watched as ground staff and baggage handlers deftly loaded suitcases into the cargo hold. A ripple of excitement coursed through her. No matter how many times she flew takeoffs, always thrilled her. It was a moment of pure possibility, leaving the ground behind and soaring into the unknown. Just when Ebony thought the worst of the awkwardness was behind her, she noticed the male flight attendant from earlier was assigned to her section. He made his way down the aisle, casually checking overhead bins. Their eyes locked for a moment. Ebony saw an icy judgment in his eyes, and her stomach flipped. He clearly remembered her from the gate. She tried to look away, but he stopped at her row. "Hello again," he said, giving her a taut smile. "Comfortable?" Ebony nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She could feel the tension, but she refused to give him any reaction that would feed into his rude behavior. He moved along, tending to the other passengers. Ebony settled back, clinging to the hope that once the plane was airborne, all this would be behind her. However, she had no idea that this was just the calm before the storm, that the flight crew's whispers would soon escalate into a spectacle that would make headlines. The airplane doors closed, and the safety demonstration began. Ebony fastened her seatbelt and listened politely as the flight attendant she'd encountered earlier pointed out the exits and demonstrated how to use the oxygen mask. She tried to remain calm, telling herself that the flight would only be a couple of hours. Soon she'd be in Chicago, ready to enjoy a well-deserved vacation. Just get through it, she thought. Yet the moment the plane began to taxi, Ebony picked up on an uncomfortable vibe. The male attendant passed by her row, pausing just long enough to shoot a discreet sneer. She noticed how he fussed over other passengers in her row, offering them pillows and blankets, but completely ignored her. This seemed like more than simple oversight. It felt deliberate. As the plane climbed into the sky, Ebony closed her eyes, trying to focus on the gentle hum of the engines, rather than her growing discomfort. She tried to recall her mother's calming words. "Baby girl, you're stronger than you think. Don't let anyone break your spirit." Yet Ebony couldn't shake off the knot twisting in her stomach. About 20 minutes into the flight, the seatbelt sign turned off. Passengers relaxed, some pulling out laptops, others flipping through magazines. Ebony reached under the seat in front of her for her headphones, planning to tune out the world with some music. Just then, the female flight attendant came by with a beverage cart. "Would you like something to drink?" she asked Ebony curtly. "Yes, please." "Can I have a ginger ale?" Ebony asked, her voice soft but steady. The flight attendant poured the soda into a plastic cup, placing it on Ebony's tray table without making eye contact. A small splash dribbled over the rim, wetting the napkin. "Sorry," she muttered, but Ebony saw no hint of genuine remorse. Then, with a tight smile, she rolled the cart away. Ebony felt singled out, but she tried to tell herself she might be imagining it. They couldn't possibly be that cruel. Right? A few minutes later, Ebony overheard chatter from behind the curtain, separating economy from the galley. It was the same male and female attendants gossiping in low but audible tones. "Do you see how she's trying to act all refined?" the male voice sneered. "Yeah," the female responded. "And those shoes. Gosh, they look like they've been through a tornado. I wonder if she's flying on some discount or something," the male attendant added, letting out a cynical chuckle. Ebony's cheeks burned. She shifted in her seat, wanting to stand up and confront them, but feeling paralyzed by the fear of making a scene. Other passengers appeared absorbed in their own matters, headphones on, eyes closed, or busy with phones and books. Nobody seemed to notice Ebony's silent turmoil. With trembling hands, Ebony sipped her ginger ale. She bit her tongue, fighting the urge to speak out. This was harassment, plain and simple. But Ebony worried about how the flight attendants, or even other passengers, would react if she confronted them. She'd seen how black women in particular often had their reactions mislabeled as aggression. "Should I call the lead flight attendant?" the pilot, Ebony, asked herself. She weighed the pros and cons, heart racing. The question echoed in her mind. Would they even believe me? Or would this escalate further? It was in that moment that a wave of determination washed over her. This was unacceptable. And Ebony James was not going to let anyone diminish her self-worth. She resolved to find a way to stand up for herself, though she had no idea what shape that would take. Little did she know fate would soon intervene in a dramatic and unexpected way, one that would test her courage and set off a chain of events that no one on that flight would ever forget. By the time the seatbelt sign illuminated again, indicating mild turbulence ahead, Ebony had built up enough frustration to speak with the lead flight attendant. She unbuckled her belt momentarily, intending to stand and walk toward the front. The plane bounced slightly, forcing her to steady herself against the back of the seat. As she neared the galley, she heard that familiar laughter again, mocking, almost malicious. The male attendant looked up, startled to see her standing there. For a second, he seemed flustered. "Is there something I can help you with?" he asked, voice clipped and polite enough to mask the scorn Ebony knew lurked beneath. "I'd like to speak to the lead flight attendant, please," Ebony said, managing to keep her tone steady, although her pulse was racing. She'd never been one to cause trouble, but their behavior was crossing a line. He pointed to a slightly older woman with a name tag that read Marilyn. Marilyn was occupied in a conversation with another passenger who seemed upset about a missing vegetarian meal option. Ebony waited patiently for her turn, ignoring the daggers shot her way by the two younger attendants. When Marilyn was free, Ebony approached. "Excuse me," she said quietly. I need to report something. I don't want to cause a scene, but 2 of your attendants have been making inappropriate comments about me, specifically mocking my appearance and my shoes." Marilyn's brows furrowed. "That's a serious accusation," she responded. "Who exactly said these things?" Ebony took a breath. "I'm not sure of their names, but it's the male attendant working this cabin and a female attendant with short blonde hair." Marilyn's face hardened. "I see," she said. "I'm sorry to hear that. Let me speak with them privately, and I'll get back to you." Ebony nodded, relief and anxiety mingling in her chest. She returned to her seat, feeling the eyes of the male attendant on her as she passed by. She tried to avoid his glare, focusing instead on the overhead light indicators and the symmetrical rows of seats. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay calm. "You did the right thing," she repeated mentally. A few minutes later, Marilyn appeared at Ebony's row. She squatted down to speak softly so as not to disturb other passengers. "I've spoken to them," Marilyn explained. "They claim there's been a misunderstanding and that they were talking about someone else's shoes. However, I understand how you feel, and I will keep an eye on the situation. If there's anything else I can do, please let me know." Though Marilyn's response was polite, Ebony sensed a hint of skepticism. It was the sort of cautious neutrality that people use when they're afraid to accuse their own team without hard evidence. Ebony thanked her and tried to let it go. She told herself that maybe now they'd stop. But as the flight continued, Ebony noticed the 2 attendants exchange glances every time they passed her row. She felt their hostility like an invisible wall pressing down on her. She closed her eyes, forcing herself to breathe steadily, reminding herself that she was strong, that she had every right to be on this flight. She thought of her father and those sneakers that had suddenly become the center of this ridiculous drama. Little did Ebony know the situation was about to spiral far beyond petty jibes about shoes. The seeds of confrontation had been planted, and as turbulence rocked the plane, Ebony could sense something far more disruptive brewing, something that would shake not just the cabin, but her life as well. All she wanted was to land peacefully in Chicago, see her best friend, and enjoy a break from her hectic life. Fate, however, seemed to have a different plan in store. The flight continued to encounter sporadic turbulence, causing the aircraft to jolt from side to side. Passengers began to feel uneasy. The seatbelt sign remained lit, urging everyone to stay seated. Flight attendants suspended beverage service to avoid accidents, but that didn't stop them from walking the aisles and checking overhead bins. Ebony, bracing her arm against the window frame, stole a glance down to her shoes. "Are they really so offensive?" she mused. Despite the seats around her being mostly full, she felt glaringly alone. The only comforting thought was that soon they'd be descending into Chicago. Suddenly the plane lurched, and the male attendant nearly lost his balance as he passed Ebony's row. He grabbed the headrest in front of her seat to steady himself. Instead of a quick "excuse me," he snapped at Ebony, his voice a strained hiss. "Stay in your seat and don't cause any trouble." Ebony's jaw tightened. She glared at him. "I'm not causing trouble." "I haven't moved an inch," she responded, keeping her voice low. The flight was turbulent enough. She didn't want to fuel any hysteria among the other passengers. He scoffed. "Right," he muttered, as if challenging her to say more. Then he moved on toward the back galley. Minutes later, Ebony felt the need to use the restroom. She unbuckled and stood up just as the turbulence subsided enough for the seatbelt sign to flicker off. She made her way down the aisle, careful to keep her balance in case another jolt hit. Reaching the small lavatory, she shut the door behind her, leaning against it for a moment as she tried to calm her shaking nerves. She took her time washing her hands, splashing some water on her face to regain composure. The bathroom mirror reflected her anxious eyes, and Ebony realized just how drained she looked. It was more than just a bumpy flight. It was the emotional toll of being singled out, insulted, and disbelieved. Just as she was about to exit, she heard shouting in the aisle. Her heart rate spiked. She cracked the door open and peeked out. The male attendant stood facing an elderly passenger who appeared disoriented. The passenger was complaining, but the attendant's voice boomed. "You need to get back to your seat, now!" he bellowed, causing nearby passengers to stare. Ebony emerged slowly, stepping aside to let the elderly passenger shuffle past. Then the flight attendant rounded on her. "What are you doing out of your seat again?" "Didn't I tell you to stay put?" Ebony's eyes widened. "I have every right to use the lavatory. The seatbelt sign is off." He leaned in closer, lowering his voice so only Ebony could hear. "Don't you give me that attitude. You think you can just do whatever you want?" Before Ebony could reply, the lead flight attendant, Marilyn, appeared. Her expression tense. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, eyeing both Ebony and the male attendant. The male attendant threw his hands up. "She's been ignoring safety instructions roaming the cabin. I tried to politely ask her to sit down." "This is exactly what I was telling you about earlier." He lied, clearly, referencing the conversation about Ebony's complaint. Ebony's mouth fell open. "That's not true. The seatbelt sign just turned off, and I came out to use the restroom." Marilyn looked from one to the other. Her face was caught in that same wary expression Ebony had seen before. "Ma'am," she said to Ebony, trying to maintain calm authority. "Please return to your seat. We'll talk when the flight lands." "Okay." Ebony wanted to protest, to fight the blatant lie, but she could feel the eyes of other passengers on her. She sensed the tension in the air, the silent crowd waiting to see if this would erupt into a full-blown confrontation. Gritting her teeth, Ebony nodded and made her way back to 28F. Her hands were trembling as she buckled up. Thoughts swirled in her head. He's lying. She must see that right. Ebony knew the airline protocol often favored flight attendants' word over a passenger's, especially in matters of safety. A sinking feeling grew in her chest. Yet Ebony also felt anger, cold, determined anger. This had gone too far. It wasn't just about her shoes anymore. They were challenging her very right to exist in this space, to be treated with dignity. Ebony grabbed her phone from the seat pocket. She had a plan forming in her mind. If the abuse continued, she'd record it. That might be her only chance of having evidence. She whispered to herself, "Stay calm. Just a little longer." Little did she know, the next leg of the journey would bring an even bigger twist, one that not only threatened her peace of mind, but would alter the path of everyone on board. Around 45 minutes into the flight, Captain Hayes's voice crackled over the intercom. He announced that due to a storm system hovering near Chicago O'Hare, the flight might have to circle or possibly divert if conditions worsened. Groans filled the cabin. Ebony closed her eyes, longing to be on solid ground. The male flight attendant, ironically, was nowhere to be seen for a while. Perhaps he was in the forward cabin. Meanwhile, the female attendant resumed her beverage service with forced cheer. Ebony tried to keep her head low, focusing on her phone, though airplane mode prevented her from doing much. She glanced at her camera app, thinking of how she might need it soon if any further harassment occurred. Suddenly, lightning flashed outside the window, illuminating the darkening sky. The plane shook violently. Gasps and shrieks echoed through the cabin. Within seconds, the seatbelt sign blinked on again, and Marilyn's voice came on the intercom, instructing all passengers to remain seated. Ebony exhaled slowly. She'd been on turbulent flights before, but something about the tension on board made this one feel worse. The lights flickered, and the plane dipped momentarily. Fear rippled through the rows of seated travelers. Ebony could feel her stomach lurch with each sudden drop. After what felt like an eternity, the captain announced they would divert to Indianapolis International Airport to wait out the worst of the storm. Passengers around Ebony muttered in disappointment, worried about missed connections and altered plans. Ebony felt a strange relief. Anything that got her off this flight sooner was fine by her. As the plane descended toward Indianapolis, Ebony clenched her armrests. Despite the uncomfortable drama, she reminded herself that safety was paramount. She peered outside, catching glimpses of city lights through the rain-splattered window. The landing was rough. The tires screeched against the wet runway, and the plane jostled like a boat in choppy water. Finally, the aircraft rolled to a stop. Passengers began talking amongst themselves, speculating on how long they'd be on the ground. Some rummaged for their phones, eager to update family and friends about the delay. Marilyn's voice came over the intercom again, explaining that they'd be waiting on the tarmac until they received clearance to deplane. Some ground crew needed to check the plane, and the weather updates were fluid. No one was allowed to leave their seats just yet. Ebony tried to steady her nerves. Maybe I can slip out once they let us off, rebook a different flight, and avoid this entire crew altogether. She sighed, wishing she could talk to her friend Ariana and let her know what was happening. Then she saw movement in the aisle, a pair of black uniform trousers, a polished belt buckle, and the same male attendant's face. He was heading straight toward her row. Ebony tensed. He leaned over with a conspiratorial smirk. "Well, well. It looks like you're stuck with us for a bit longer," he whispered. Ebony glanced around. A few passengers were looking at them curiously, but no one intervened. She narrowed her eyes. "I'll find another flight if I have to," she said in a hushed tone. "I won't stay where I'm not respected." He shrugged. "Suit yourself. But if you cause any issues, don't be surprised if you're escorted off this plane and banned from future flights. We take passenger disruptions very seriously." Ebony's anger flared. "Passenger disruption? You're the one harassing me." He gave a cold smile and turned away, leaving Ebony seething. She felt trapped, outraged by the threat. There was little she could do as long as they remained on the plane. Outside, rain pelted the windows, and the runway lights glimmered in the downpour. The sense of being stranded both physically and emotionally deepened. Yet Ebony refused to break down. She clutched her phone, remembering she could record any further confrontation. More importantly, she knew she had resources outside of this plane. She was not powerless, and as fate would have it, a phone call she would soon make would change the course of not just her day, but also that of the flight crew who dared to underestimate her. After what felt like hours, but was closer to 45 minutes, the captain announced that passengers could deplane temporarily. The storm around Chicago still raged, making it unsafe to land. The plan was for everyone to wait inside the Indianapolis terminal until further instructions came through. Relief spread throughout the cabin. People just wanted to stretch their legs and escape the tension in the stuffy aircraft. Ebony rose from her seat, grabbed her carry-on, and stepped into the aisle. She kept her gaze fixed forward, avoiding eye contact with the male attendant. The female flight attendant lingered near the exit expression, unreadable, but Ebony sensed neither warmth nor remorse. As she entered the jet bridge, The cool air was a welcome change. She made her way into the terminal, finding a relatively quiet corner by a row of charging stations. Settling her bag beside her, Ebony plugged in her phone. Her heart thumped, adrenaline still coursing through her from the earlier confrontation. But now off the plane, she felt a surge of courage. She dialed Ariana's number. Her friend picked up on the third ring. "Ebony." "Are you here already?" Ariana asked, sounding excited. Ebony took a deep breath. "I'm in Indianapolis. We had to divert. But that's not even the half of it. I've been harassed by 2 flight attendants, like seriously harassed. They were making fun of my shoes, insinuating all sorts of nasty things." "Your shoes?" "That's insane," Ariana exclaimed. "You okay?" "I'm holding up, but they threatened me. One attendant claimed I was causing a disturbance when I wasn't. I'm afraid this could escalate. I complained to the lead attendant, but she didn't seem convinced." "Ariana, I don't feel safe flying with them again." "Don't board the same plane," Ariana suggested firmly. "Rebook or something. That's my plan, but seats might be hard to come by with the storm. And who knows if the airline will accommodate me." Ariana hesitated for a moment. "You know my cousin works in aviation services. He might have connections for a private charter if you're really in a bind." "It's expensive, but I remember you once telling me about that bonus from your new job. Or maybe your new boss could help," Ebony considered. The money from her job signing bonus was mostly saved for emergencies and helping her mom. But this situation felt pressing. Still a private charter that seemed extreme. Then again, she was being effectively bullied by flight staff. Just the thought churned her stomach with both anger and anxiety. "Let me see if the airline can rebook me first," Ebony said. "If they give me trouble, then maybe I'll consider a private option. I just don't want to let them treat me like I'm worthless." "You're not worthless," Ariana reassured her. "Keep me posted, and if you need me to call a lawyer or raise some social media storm, I'm down." They ended the call, and Ebony felt slightly relieved to have Ariana in her corner. She looked down at her shoes, those scuffed sneakers that had somehow become the symbol of her oppression on this flight. She pressed her lips together, a new determination forming. She wasn't going to let this ruin her trip or her spirit. Standing up, Ebony spotted a nearby American Airlines service desk. She joined the short line, waiting to request a seat on a different flight or airline if possible. She was ready to explain the harassment situation. However, as she inched closer to the counter, she noticed the same male flight attendant walking through the terminal. Their eyes met. He shot her a warning glare before disappearing around a corner. A chill ran through Ebony. She clutched her phone, reminding herself that she had it as a tool and a weapon if needed. She took a deep breath, resolved to maintain her composure. Little did she know the next few minutes would lead her to an encounter that would rewrite her entire strategy and set the stage for a dramatic departure that no one could have predicted. Ebony stepped up to the service desk. A middle-aged woman named Denise greeted her. "How can I help you today?" Denise asked, typing away at a computer behind the counter. Ebony cleared her throat. "I'm on the diverted flight from Atlanta to Chicago. I've experienced harassment from 2 crew members. I don't feel comfortable continuing with them. Is it possible to be placed on another flight?" Denise frowned, concern flickering in her eyes. "Harassment? I'm sorry to hear that. Let me check for available seats." She tapped some keys, scanning the passenger manifest. "The next flight with available seats is in 6 hours, but it's with the same crew. Another airline might have a seat, but it won't be until tomorrow morning." Ebony's shoulders sagged. Tomorrow, she'd have to spend the night in Indianapolis. She swallowed her frustration, then asked, "Is there any chance the airline would cover a hotel if I choose not to continue on that same aircraft? I really don't feel safe." Denise paused. Normally, if it's weather-related, the airline doesn't cover lodging. But harassment is another matter. "Let me talk to a supervisor." She disappeared into the back, leaving Ebony at the counter, feeling vulnerable under the fluorescent lights of the busy terminal. A moment later, Denise returned with a tall, well-dressed man, her supervisor. He introduced himself as Roger. "I understand you've had some issues with the crew," he said, his voice neutral. "Could you tell me exactly what happened?" Ebony recounted the mocking about her shoes, the remarks about her being a disturbance, and how the male flight attendant threatened her. She didn't leave out any details. Roger listened with a grave expression. He glanced around, then leaned in. "I'm sorry this happened. We can't condone staff mistreatment. I'll file a report. In the meantime, we can offer you a rebooking on tomorrow's flight, plus a hotel voucher. That's the best we can do." Relieved that he was at least taking her seriously, Ebony nodded. "Thank you. I'll take the hotel voucher." It wasn't the perfect solution, but it beat staying on that plane with those attendants. At least she could have a safe night's rest and fly in peace tomorrow. Just then a voice behind Ebony interjected. "Ebony. Ebony. James." Ebony turned around. Standing there was William Reed, a familiar face from her past, an old friend of her father's, someone she hadn't seen in years. He was dressed in a sleek navy blue suit, a small pilot's pin on his lapel. He looked older, with a dusting of grey in his hair, but the warm smile was unmistakable. Mr. Reed Ebony gasped. "What, how?" He chuckled. "I'm a charter pilot now, working for a private aviation company. I just landed here due to this nasty weather. I heard your name, and I had to check." Overwhelmed by the coincidence, Ebony explained the situation. William's face darkened with concern. "That's unacceptable," he said firmly. "Your father was one of the kindest men I ever knew. The last thing he'd want is for you to be treated this way." Roger stood by, looking politely puzzled. Ebony introduced William briefly. He was a friend of my dad's, a pilot. William turned to Ebony, a spark in his eye. "I've got a helicopter charter request from a VIP client scheduled tomorrow at midday, but I have a bit of free time now. If you need a ride somewhere, especially Chicago, I might be able to arrange something with my company." He paused. "It won't be free, but it might be less hassle than the airline. And we can leave as soon as the weather clears enough for rotorcraft to fly safely." Ebony glanced at Roger, then back at William. It felt surreal, like the universe had placed a guardian angel in her path. Could I really leave by helicopter? She weighed the cost, but her mind all buzzed with the memory of her father, and how William had once promised to help Ebony if she ever needed it. That might be amazing, Ebony managed. "I don't want to cause you any trouble." William grinned. "No trouble at all. It'll be my pleasure to stick it to any airline crew who can't see what a gem you are." He lowered his voice. "I'll make a few calls, check on the flight conditions, and get back to you. If it works, we'll have you in Chicago tonight." Ebony's heart soared. The idea of bypassing the entire fiasco and arriving in style felt like poetic justice. She thanked William, who walked off to make his calls. Meanwhile, Roger and Denise completed her rebooking and hotel arrangements. A strange sense of calm settled over Ebony. She realized that not all was lost. She had an escape route, and quite possibly a grand one. The memory of the flight attendants' sneering faces haunted her, but she also felt empowered by the knowledge that she wasn't alone. Destiny had placed an ally in her path at exactly the right moment. While waiting for William to confirm the helicopter details, Ebony found a quiet airport cafe and ordered a sandwich and tea. Her stomach finally reminded her it hadn't been fed since morning, but the real nourishment came from the growing sense of relief. After everything she was close to escape on her terms. She considered calling her mom, but hesitated. Lorraine already worked too hard and worried too much. I'll wait until I land safely in Chicago, she thought, sipping her tea. Just as Ebony finished her meal, William appeared with a hopeful smile. "Good news," he said. "A helicopter's available. If weather permits, we can be in the air in under 2 hours." Ebony's eyes widened. "Seriously?" William nodded. "We'll need to dodge some storm edges, but it's doable. We'll fly straight into Chicago." Overwhelmed, Ebony touched his arm. "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done without you." "Your father was a good man," he said warmly. "This is the least I can do." As William left to finalize preparations, Ebony grabbed her things and began making her way toward the private terminal. But before she exited the main concourse, something pulled her toward the original gate. There they were, the same flight attendants, standing behind the desk, checking their devices. The male attendant looked up and locked eyes with her. His expression twisted into a frown, confused and irritated. Ebony met his stare with calm defiance. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Turning on her heel, Ebony walked away, no longer just a passenger, but a woman reclaiming her dignity, ready to rise above the cruelty that tried to keep her grounded. Ebony made her way to the main concourse, double-checking her phone for William's text message. She found a secluded seating area near some potted plants and free Wi-Fi. Tapping her foot impatiently, she scrolled through social media to distract herself. Moments later, a notification popped up. "William, meet me at Gate L in the private terminal in 30 minutes. I have a pass for you at the security desk." A surge of excitement warmed Ebony from within. She grabbed her bag and navigated the maze of hallways and escalators leading to the private terminal area. The bustle of the main airport gradually thinned out, replaced by business travelers, charter flight crew, and sleek signage indicating VIP lounges. As Ebony approached the private terminal, she spotted a kiosk with a single security guard. True to William's text, there was a pass waiting under her name. She flashed her ID, and the guard waved her through. "This is really happening," she thought, hardly believing the turn of events. She found William near a sitting area, reviewing some flight charts on a tablet. He wore a light jacket with his company logo embroidered on the chest. "Right on time," he said, smiling. "The weather is starting to clear west of here. We'll have to skirt the storm's edge, but we should be okay." Ebony's heart fluttered with both nerves and anticipation. "Thank you again," she said. "I still can't believe this is real." He gave her a fatherly grin. "Let's get you settled in the lounge. The helicopter is being fueled and prepped. Should be another half hour or so." Just as Ebony set her bag down, the door to the private terminal slid open. In walked the male flight attendant from her earlier flight. Her blood ran cold. What is he doing here? He spotted her instantly. Instead of the uniform jacket, he wore a polo shirt and slacks, likely something he changed into during the delay. His eyes flicked to William, then back to Ebony. With a condescending smirk, he strode toward them. "So this is where you ran off to," he said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Trying to score some special service you don't deserve." His gaze landed on William's pilot badge. "Who are you, her private chauffeur?" William stiffened. "Sir, this area is restricted." If you have no official business here, you need to leave. The flight attendant produced a staff ID from his pocket. I'm with the airline, so I'm allowed to be here. And I'm just checking on a passenger who caused a disturbance on my flight, making sure she's not creating another scene. Ebony's fists clenched. I didn't cause any disturbance. You harassed me. He shrugged theatrically. All I know is you filed a complaint, wasted our time, and here you are, getting some kind of VIP treatment. Doesn't seem fair. William squared his shoulders, stepping forward. I know who you are now. Let me be clear. Ebony is under my care, and I won't tolerate your disrespect. We'll be on our way soon, and you can go about your business. A sneer twisted the attendant's lips. Yeah, well, good luck with your fancy helicopter ride. Just know people like her eventually get what's coming to them. Ebony felt a flash of anger so intense she wanted to retort. But William placed a calming hand on her arm. She stared the attendant down, letting the gravity of his hateful words sink in. Then she turned away, refusing to stoop to his level. Security personnel in the lounge noticed the commotion. One guard approached, shooting the attendant a stern look. Is there a problem? William spoke calmly. No problem. This gentleman was just leaving. Realizing he was outnumbered, the flight attendant stepped back. I'll be sure to file my own report, he muttered before stalking out the door. Ebony released a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She felt the adrenaline coursing through her veins. William squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. Don't worry about him. Focus on your journey. She nodded, managing a small smile. Inside, however, her mind churned with the tension of the confrontation. She reminded herself that soon she'd be high above the clouds, leaving that hateful man and his cruelty behind. For now, though, she needed to keep her wits about her. The final act of this unexpected saga was about to unfold, and she intended to face it head-on with her dignity firmly intact. A soft buzz from William's phone signaled the final all-clear. The weather pattern had shifted just enough for their route to be deemed safe for helicopter travel. Ebony grabbed her carry-on heart, thudding with excitement and a tinge of anxiety. She followed William out to a small, cordoned-off area of the tarmac, where a sleek black helicopter stood waiting, rotors gently spinning in idle mode. Ducking her head against the rotor wash, Ebony climbed aboard, marveling at the plush interior. The craft was compact with leather seats and noise-cancelling headsets for passengers. William settled in the pilot's seat, running through a pre-flight checklist with practiced efficiency. Ebony fastened her seatbelt, slipping on a headset, so she could hear William over the noise. He gave her a thumbs up, and the ground crew signaled them to go. The helicopter lifted smoothly, ascending above the twinkling lights of Indianapolis. Ebony felt a wave of adrenaline and relief crash over her. I'm leaving all that negativity behind, literally. As they climbed higher, Ebony glanced out the window. The city spread below in a shimmering grid partially obscured by low-lying clouds. She couldn't help but smile. Just hours ago, she'd been stuck in an uncomfortable seat on a turbulent flight, dealing with cruel attendants who mocked her shoes. Now she was gliding through the sky in a private helicopter, piloted by a lifelong friend of her father's. William's voice crackled in her headset. We'll skirt around the storm cells. Might be a little bumpy, but nothing like what you experienced on that plane. Ebony nodded, voice shaky with emotion. I'm so grateful, Mr. Reed. Thank you for everything. Call me William, he said gently. Your dad was good to me, and I'm glad I can return the favor. The city lights dimmed beneath them as they flew over less populated areas. Ebony's mind drifted, recalling every look of contempt the flight attendants had given her. She wondered what they would say if they saw her now cruising in style, her scuffed sneakers resting comfortably on the luxurious carpet. A small laugh bubbled from her lips. This was poetic justice, the kind of outcome you'd only read about in viral social media posts. Yet here she was, living it. She felt an odd sense of triumph, but also sadness that she'd been forced into such a situation. In a perfect world, no one would be bullied or ridiculed based on appearances. But we're not in a perfect world, Ebony thought. That's why moments like this need to be cherished, reminders that kindness and help can come from unexpected places. William pointed to a cluster of lights in the distance. That's the edge of the storm, he informed her. We'll navigate around it. Should be in Chicago in about an hour, give or take. Ebony nodded, leaning back in her seat. The hum of the engine was oddly soothing. An hour to freedom, she thought. An hour to a new start. Despite the tensions of the day, she felt a serene calm settling in. She was no longer a trapped passenger subject to mockery. She was in control of her destiny, and that destiny was carrying her to Chicago high above the petty judgments left behind on the tarmac. As the helicopter neared Chicago, Ebony spotted the iconic skyline rising through the mist. Lights sparkled across the buildings, and despite the long, stressful day, her heart lifted. This was it, her sanctuary, her fresh start. William contacted a private helipad on the city's edge. Once they received clearance, the helicopter descended gently. The rhythmic hum of the rotors filled the cabin as the aircraft touched down. A blast of cool autumn air met Ebony as she stepped out the wind, tugging at her coat. She had made it on her own terms. A sleek black SUV waited nearby. Once her bag was loaded, Ebony turned to William and hugged him tightly. Thank you. I'll never forget this. You're welcome, he said with a smile. Your father would be proud. With a final wave, she climbed into the car. As they drove into the heart of the city, her phone buzzed a message from Ariana. Where are you? Ebony replied with a grin. In Chicago. Long story. Took a helicopter. The reply came instantly, filled with shocked emojis and excitement. Soon the SUV pulled up outside Ariana's apartment. She was already waiting on the sidewalk, arms open. Girl, what in the world happened? She shouted, pulling Ebony into a hug. I'll explain everything. Ebony laughed. Just let me breathe for a second. Inside the cozy apartment, Ebony sank into the couch while Ariana handed her a steaming mug of tea. I still can't believe this, Ariana said. A helicopter. Ebony looked down at her worn sneakers resting on the rug. Those flight attendants mocked these shoes, but they didn't know who I was, or who I had behind me. Ariana smiled proudly. Well, they'll know now. Ebony exhaled, finally at peace. I'm just glad to be here. I came in flying high, and not just literally. The next morning, Ebony woke up in Ariana's guest room, feeling more rested than she had in days. Daylight streamed through the blinds, casting warm golden rays across the bed. She stretched luxuriously, momentarily, disoriented, until she remembered she was in Chicago, far from the hostile environment of that flight. As she wandered into the living room, Ariana was already up, scrolling through her phone. Ebony, have you seen this? Ariana asked, gesturing to her screen. Ebony approached, squinting at a news clip. An online article headlined, American Airlines passenger accuses flight crew of discrimination harassment. Ebony's eyes widened. Wait, that's me, yeah, girl, Ariana exclaimed. Apparently someone else on your flight recorded the attendants mocking you. The video is going viral on Twitter. A strange mix of shock and satisfaction washed over Ebony. She clicked on the clip and saw a short video of the male and female attendants huddled near the galley, whispering and laughing about those raggedy shoes. The camera then panned to Ebony's row, capturing her hunched shoulders, oblivious at the time that she was being recorded. Tears pricked Ebony's eyes. She felt exposed but also vindicated, proof that she hadn't exaggerated or made it all up. The comment section buzzed with outrage. People condemned the flight attendants for their cruelty, some calling for boycotts of the airline, others tagging American Airlines' official account to demand action. Ariana clicked on another link. "And look at this," she said, reading from an official statement. American Airlines is aware of a viral video depicting alleged misconduct by 2 of our flight crew members. We take such allegations seriously and are conducting an internal investigation. We apologize to Ms. Ebony James and any other passengers who felt disrespected or uncomfortable due to our employees' behavior. Ebony's jaw dropped. She stared at Ariana, hardly able to believe it. After all the humiliation and self-doubt she experienced, the company was now publicly acknowledging the issue. Finally, she thought some justice. Reports soon followed that the 2 attendants had been placed on temporary leave pending the investigation. A few outlets even ran with the story of Ebony departing via helicopter, framing it as a triumphant twist of fate. Tweets labeled her #helicopter. Heroine, praising her for standing tall in the face of racism and classism. Ebony's phone buzzed incessantly with messages from friends, acquaintances, and unknown numbers. Some offered support, others asked for interviews. Part of her wanted to hide from the sudden spotlight, but another part recognized this was bigger than her. This was a chance to highlight how wrong it was to treat anyone with such disrespect. She spent an hour drafting a thoughtful statement, finally posting it on her social media. "I never expected my personal ordeal to become a public event. I'm grateful for the support and hope this sparks conversations about empathy, respect, and the value of every human being, regardless of appearance, background, or shoes. Let's do better." As the day unfolded, her story spread further. Cable news channels picked it up. Talk show producers reached out, and Ebony even received a personal message from a high-level American Airlines executive apologizing for her experience and promising disciplinary measures against the crew. The karmic scales had indeed tipped. The flight attendants' mocking laughter was now echoing back at them in the form of public outrage and corporate scrutiny. Ebony's plight had illuminated a deep-seated issue, and the world was listening. She felt a quiet satisfaction that justice was being served, not out of vengeance, but because people needed to see that prejudice and cruelty have tangible consequences. Yet despite the swirl of media attention, Ebony took a moment to simply breathe in the crisp Chicago air from Ariana's balcony. She looked down at her worn sneakers. "Dad," she whispered, "I wish you could see this." A tear slipped down her cheek, tears of both sadness and gratitude. She felt closer to her father in that moment, realizing how proud he would be, that she stood up for herself, not just for her sake, but for anyone who'd ever been belittled for not fitting someone else's narrow definition of acceptable. Yes, the karma had come back around, and Ebony was ready to keep moving forward one step at a time in those beloved shoes. Ebony's journey reminds us all that dignity can shine through the darkest skies, from the hurtful mocking of flight attendants to a triumphant helicopter escape and viral vindication. Her story proves that ego status may rattle us, but it can never destroy us if we stand firm in our truth. As the spotlight intensified, Ebony transformed her painful experience into a powerful message about empathy, respect, and the importance of celebrating each other's stories, no matter how tattered the shoes may be. If this tale moved you, if you felt Ebony's pain and cheered her final victory, help us share her message of hope and resilience. Like this video, subscribe to our channel and spread the word, because real-life stories of courage deserve to be heard by many. Together we can ensure that respect and humanity flourish in every corner of our world.